Why is there a need for digitization? A, very obvious, it's vast, scattered. If we don't digitize, they will be lost, right? Degradation is common. People used to copy the manuscripts typically about 100 to 200 years, depending on the how good the manuscript was and so on. The most important is the fact that the Indologists end up, especially of the foreign variety, end up skewing our understanding of these things significantly if we don't have good digitization. I will spend a couple of minutes on talking about what do I mean by digitization, because this is something which is very critical. We need to have a structured access, and knowledge cannot remain locked. I referred to the Koba Tirth library, which has 4 lakh manuscripts. A large amount of the manuscripts, almost 2 lakh, have been actually photographed or scanned, and they are available. But unfortunate part is that it's in a LAN, which means that sitting here, I cannot access it. Somebody has to actually be a part of that particular network to be able to access it. And most of them are JPEGs, which means that I cannot do a search to find out whether certain Karmakanda, which is referred, let's say, in Jina Dharma, is similar to the Karmakanda which is referred to in Vaidika Dharma. I just can't do it because, though we all know that it's very similar, we just don't have the ability to do it because the search capability is very low. So unless we have OCR, metadata, and searchable access, I believe that it's not really digitized. So just want to make this point very clear, because people will go back. People, there are lots of numbers floating around on Google and so on. But it's very critical to understand what do we mean by digitization. Why is this critical today? Right? I spoke about it. I keep coming back to the same points again and again. Why is this very critical? Because, as in Ramayana, one of the places, Valmiki says, Punarayaman Kapihi, the great Kapi came back. So it's critical to keep repeating the same point again and again until it's instilled in our own minds, especially my own mind. Because we will not produce the kind of scholars we used to produce once upon a time through the traditional learning mechanism, people who have familiarity with technology, people who have familiarity with mathematics or engineering or any other discipline, or the technical discipline in which that particular work is written. For example, it could be Shilpa Shastra, Agama Shastra, any of the Shastras. That is why it's super critical that we need to control this, and we need to be able to do it today. Contrast this with the Western libraries. Western libraries have, in my opinion, about roughly 1% of the kind of manuscripts we have, just 1%. Though there are a lot of horror stories about somebody took this, somebody took that, etc., which is all hamari dharohar hai, parantu the amount they have is not very large. But they have 100% digitized. So this means that one Turushka, who may not necessarily be the best scholar in the world, has access and the ability to be able to do a quick search and be able to twist and turn. I will give an example of what do I mean by twist and turn. There was a book which I read about a couple of years ago, where this lady who is the author of this, one Malik, referred to the word Trivarga as the 3 upper castes. Now they have, this is very sad, because nobody who has come through the Samskrita tradition will ever talk about Trivarga as anything to do with caste, because Trivarga always invariably refers to the 3 Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, right? In that context, it's always that. You can't generally take an English dictionary and say Varga means, segment, or Varga means an ability to split something. So Trivarga will mean 3 something, and I will put whatever is my narrative, right? So it's critical that we have the ability to have the traditional scholarship combined with digitization, because then the traditional scholars have access to a vast enormity of manuscripts. All of this is a precursor to what I wanted to say, which is why MIDF? What are we trying to do with manuscripts and inscription digitization foundation, which is where I come from, right? Which is one of my, not necessarily my day job, but definitely one of the things which I love to do. Our idea is to be able to digitize and help other organizations who can do digitization in a structured, standardized fashion, create the process which allows for people to have access to these, have something like an archive.org with free access so that people can have true access to all of these materials which our ancestors have produced. So unified access, standardization of digitization, and empowerment of scholarship. These are the 3 focus areas of MIDF. Why do I keep going back to, why are we trying to do digitization as an organization? Scholarship typically goes in 3 ways, right? You need to have access to the old works which we have. Then people like Professor Arinanger, who I referred to earlier, incidentally has also written a brilliant paper on, again, time of India, about Irina. People keep saying that Arya is related to Iran. because of the word, root word and so on. Actually, Irina refers to an animal in Gujarat. So he has written a brilliant paper on this. Any of you who are, I would suggest any of you who want to get some idea of the kind of work he has done to refer to any of the papers he has written. Work follows in 3 steps. Digitized work which people have access to, that is foundational. The second part is paper writing. And the third part is the kind of books which can come in. For example, the papers which Professor Michel Danino wrote in IIT Gandhinagar, then paved the way for the books which Sri Sanjeev Sanyal wrote, Land of Seven Rivers and so on, right? So this is how, and then the narrative setting happens. We need to have the digitization, which is why we are focused on the foundational process so that we can create foundational infrastructure which is sustainable, access to everyone. One of the great poets of Kashmir is a gentleman, or actually was a king called Chandraka, who existed in, I think, 1st century CE or 2nd century CE. He's written a lot of works, especially on Nataka. Natya Prabandha is supposed to be one of his works. We don't have access to it because we don't know. Maybe it exists in Tibet because a lot of Kashmiri works ended up in Tibet many centuries, especially when the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century invasion started. I always, many talks I end up talking about him. Very fond of Kashmiri poets, from South. Incidentally, one of the surnames which is very popular in Kashmir for poets used to be Bhatta. So I keep making joke that maybe I am from that lineage. I have no idea, but I keep saying this. And Chandraka, we know of Chandraka because we have, in some anthologies, there is a reference to some line from Chandraka. And one of the lines most probably has one of the characters who is going to war. If any of you have seen old Hindi movies, they will swear saying, "Main jeet ke aaunga," or some such thing, right? And Chandraka says, "Yuddheshu bhagya chapaleshu name pratigna." Now, I don't swear in these for war because it's fickle. Bhagya chapala. One never knows whether you're going to win, you're going to lose. So I'm not going to have any pratigna. Yuddheshu bhagya chapaleshu name pratigna. Daivan niyachati jayancha parajayancha. It is Daiva, the Sukrita of mine, of old and so on, which actually will give me victory or defeat. Daivan niyachati jayancha parajayancha. Eshaiva me ranagatasya sada pratigna. This is my pratigna when I'm entering a war. Whenever I enter a war, this is the only pratigna I will do. Eshaiva me ranagatasya sada pratigna. Pashyanti anna ripavo jaganam hayanam. That the enemies will never see the behinds, the arses of my horses. Pun intended.